Good afternoon, everybody. All right, good afternoon. Even those back in the back, good afternoon. All right, welcome to the plenary session. I have the privilege of introducing it, but before I do that, I hope you've had a chance to grab a drink and get some food. Contrary to my own beliefs, the bars will remain open throughout the session tonight. So you don't have to get your drink right this second, but the bars will remain open throughout the session tonight. So if you have a drink, let's toast to a fantastic 2024 AAAS annual meeting. I hope you've had an amazing meeting. You know, this amazing meeting wouldn't have been possible without our partners and supporters, and so I'm going to take just one more chance to call them out as being our wonderful partners and supporters. And I'm going to start with Arizona State University. You're going to be doing that a lot. The Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, CURE, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, the University of Colorado Boulder, the Georgia Tech School of Public Policy, Florida International University, the U.S. Department of Energy Office of Science, Amgen, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, IBM, Smart Simple Software, the George Washington University, Fulbright, the University of Chicago Press, and Cambridge University Press. Again, thank you to those incredible organizations, many of whom are longtime partners of the AAAS. Without their support, this annual meeting wouldn't be what it is. Now, I also want to take a moment to acknowledge some of the people without whom this event would not take place. Now, first and foremost on that list has to be our president, Keith Yamamoto. Keith is the chair of this meeting, and he has really shaped the program that you saw, and I think it was absolutely extraordinary. Towards Science Without Walls, I think permeated everything we talked about. He also led the exceptional work of our scientific program committee, several of whom are still here tonight. Please give them another round of applause. That's hard work, and sometimes you get to see the fruits of their labor, but you don't get to see the labor. So thank you very much to that program committee. Now, Keith has standing alongside him our colleagues on the AAAS Board of Directors. So I want to thank them also. Our chair, Gilda Barabino, our incoming president, Willie May, who you're going to hear from later on tonight, our treasurer, Carolyn Ainsley, and the rest of our absolutely tremendous board of directors at AAAS. I also want to thank the leaders of our AAAS sections. The sections contribute to the programming of this meeting in important ways. And again, this is work that is not often cited, but you see the fruits of that labor in the amazing program that we have, and I want to make sure that we thank our section leaders. Thank you for the work that you do. And last, but certainly not least, behind the scenes, there is an amazing team of dedicated and talented AAAS staff who work year-round to bring us all here. And yeah, I am in awe of them because I see them working on this meeting starting in February of the year before. So I want to make sure that we give them a big round of applause. Thank you to that amazing team. All right, so that brings me to my job tonight. My job tonight is simple and quick, and that is that I'm going to introduce my colleague Holden Thorp and allow him to drive us through the next hour or so of fascinating conversation with some of my favorite people. And if you don't know some of these folks already, they're about to become some of your favorite people too. Because if you have a plenary session that is set up a little bit like a discotheque, well, then you got to have some rock stars on stage. And that's what we're about to have. So now, in introducing Holden, Holden doesn't like to be introduced formally. He's got all those things like degrees and accolades and memberships in various academies and clubs. I'm going to skip all that. I'm going to say that Holden Thorp is the editor-in-chief of Science and the Science family of journals. And if you've ever read his editorial page, you know he's a little bit boring. He doesn't stick out. He likes to keep his opinions to himself. And he's always been that way. For those of you who are not laughing, it's the opposite of that. I'm being facetious. And he's always been that way. You know, I happen to have known Holden, it turns out, for almost 30 years. And I'm not that old. It turns out that Holden was a young, very young assistant professor at the University of North Carolina when I was a undergrad. And what you're going to notice about us is that our accents aren't the same. He's got an Eastern North Carolina accent, and I've got a Western North Carolina accent. So if you can't pick that out, I want you to work on that tonight. But in the meantime, I want you to pay attention to the rock star panel that he's going to bring up here and have an absolutely wonderful conversation with. I'm going to put on my hat now because my work is done. Thank you all for being here for an amazing AAAS annual meeting.
Who knew two guys from North Carolina would end up running all of this? Let's hear it for Sudha Parikh and all his tremendous leadership. It's not easy having an opinion columnist for a editor-in-chief, but you're the one who gave me the opinion column, so I'm in charge for the next 68 minutes and 40 seconds. Before we do that, though, I've got some quick announcements. For those of you who played the AAAS annual meeting bingo game and have been waiting on the edge of your seat to see if you won the grand prize, your wait is over. The winners are receiving 2 sets of free registrations, one for you and a guest, to our 2025 annual meeting in Boston, Massachusetts, where the weather in February is fantastic. And to help me is my assistant, Andrew Black. Andrew Black, everybody. How many are drawing? 2?
What does it say, 2? Sure.
It says draw 2.
Yeah, 2.
Okay.
You have to pay for it if you draw more.
Oh, yeah. All right. Okay. The first winner is Molly Bird from the NIH.
Probably can't win it.
Oh, well, yeah. She'll have to fill out some form, I guess, if we give her something. And the second winner is Krish Misra from the Saranoa School. Saranoan School? Sure. Krish, congratulations. All right, congratulations to our winners. And for those who have enjoyed the presentation in the student e-poster competition sponsored by Georgia Tech, please keep an eye out for the April 19th issue of Science, where the 20 first-place winners and 20 honorable mentions will be announced. And now for tonight's panel. First, I'd like to reintroduce Keith Yamamoto, AAAS President for 66 minutes and 50 seconds, and Chair of this year's annual meeting. Keith is also the Vice Chancellor for Science Policy and Strategy, Director of Precision Medicine, and Professor of Cellular and Molecular Pharmacology at the University of California, San Francisco. Keith Yamamoto, everybody. Next, we have Michael Crow, who is a United States educator, science and technology scholar, and university design architect. He's the current president of Arizona State University. Go Sun Devils. He is credited with creating the New American University model, and he was previously executive vice provost of Columbia University, where he was also a professor of science and technology policy. Michael Crow, everyone. Our next panelist is Kaye Husbands Feeling. She is an economist who is dean of the Ivan Allen College of Liberal Arts at Georgia Tech, the Georgia Institute of Technology, where she previously taught for 20 years at Williams College, served in several staff positions with the National Science Foundation, and chaired the School of Public Policy at Georgia Tech. Kaye Husbands Feelings, everybody. Our next to the stage is Margaret Peggy Hamburg, who is an internationally recognized leader in public health medicine and science, perhaps best known for her expertise on biological threats and biomedical research and innovation. She currently serves as the co-president of the Inter-Academy Partnership, and she has previously been the commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration of the United States of America. Peggy Hamburg, everybody. And finally, our next AAAS president in just a few minutes, Willie E. May. He is a chemist who was director of the United States National Institutes of Standards and Technology and the U.S. Undersecretary of Commerce for Standards and Technology, and he's currently the Vice President for Research and Economic Development at Morgan State University in the great state of Maryland. Okay, thanks everybody. See what we can come up with. I'm going to start off with, a kind of simple and bland question, of course. And it goes back to, you learn a lot when you're raising your children. And when my daughter was about 8, we were at the dinner table and my wife said something about me being a scientist. And my 8-year-old daughter said, "Dad, are you a scientist?" And I said, "Well, yeah," thinking I was a very bad parent for not having told my daughter this up until this point. But she said, "I don't get that, because every time I go to work with you, all you do is talk on the phone and type on the computer." So, Keith, you've written an editorial that says, "Help wanted scientists need to apply." And we're surrounded by people who make all kinds of different contributions to the scientific community. And I work with 160 of them that bring Science Magazine to you with great expertise every week, every day. And in my view, they're all scientists because they're part of the scientific community. And if we want people to feel good about science, we should let everybody who wants to be a scientist and have an opportunity to do it. So my question for each of you is, who is a scientist? Dr. Y, you get to go first, because I know you don't agree with me.
We don't agree, it's true. Because I happen to know that because he wrote an editorial the week before mine that said that his fantastic staff are scientists. He claimed that he's a scientist. So I don't agree with that. I think that scientists are people that are doing or leading research investigations, planning scientific experiments and carrying them out, finding scientific strategies, carrying them out. And so the rest of us, and I now have to include myself since I just closed my lab.
So you're dead wood too, just like me?
Dead wood, absolutely.
Okay.
Are important, let's say in some cases essential members of the scientific community. But within that community, there's a sector of scientists and other people that are doing things scattered really throughout society. It's what we need, is people with scientific expertise who know how to think about problems and break them into pieces that can be attacked with gathering evidence. And you could call all of that science, but to me, those people are facilitating the work of the scientists, and in that sense, they're essential parts of the scientific community.
Okay, but you're only a scientist if you're doing research. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Right. Okay, Willie May.
Well, knowing that I would be asked this question, I decided to get my answer from ChatGPT. So what it told me was, and I agree, science is a systematic pursuit of knowledge that deals with the physical world and its phenomena. So anyone who does that, it involves unbiased observation and systematic experimentation. In essence, science seeks to uncover general truths or understand the fundamental laws that govern our universe. So anyone who does that can call themselves a scientist.
Okay, all right. So,
now,
Willie,
it doesn't mean other people might not, but they can call themselves a scientist,
okay,
in my view.
All right, so you're with me then, more or less. Yeah, okay, Kaye?
Although you have always said that ChatGPT is designed to lie.
Well, it is designed to lie, but that's...
One more, you know, back when I was a kid, younger, being a scientist was cool. So I'm not really sure that many people would want to adopt that thing.
Well,
now,
that's...
the way that we are that we are looked upon by our society. But certainly, I think anyone can do that. There are people that are scientists that are formally trained. Obviously, folks who spend the years to invest in a PhD in a science is a scientist. But I think you can blur the line sometimes.
Yep. Okay. Kaye?
So I have a very broad definition. I'm a social scientist. I'm an economist by training, and I work in the social sciences. If you look at the National Science Foundation and the way they categorize science, it's broader than only the physical sciences or the biological sciences. So when I thought about the question, who is a scientist, I said it's someone who engages in discovery and rediscovery, someone that just is really interested in getting to the essence of why things occur in our physical world, in our minds, in our bodies, in the environment, in various places. I also remember one particular workshop I went to where we were thinking about what happened in Flint, Michigan in terms of the water crisis. And there were engineers in the room, and there were ethicists in the room, and then there were community participants in the room who could really unpack what was happening throughout that environment, and not just the engineering or the scientific aspect of it, not just the ethics of what happened, but also how did it happen. It was all important for the discovery and rediscovery of what was happening. So as a social scientist, I definitely have a broader view, and I wanted to just finish with reading one thing Vannevar Bush wrote: "Yet it would be folly to set up a program under which research in the natural sciences and medicine was expanded at the cost of the social sciences, humanities, and other studies so essential to national well-being." And then there was another quote that says, "Science cannot live by and unto itself." So I just wanted to, if this is without walls, right? I just wanted to broaden that a bit. Thank you, social scientists in the house. And also, you know, we are eager to understand how things work. And this is what I want my daughter to understand. This is what I want our students to understand. This is what I want our communities to understand about discovery and rediscovery.
I totally agree with that.
Okay, Mr. President.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. If you define our species by one thing and separate us from other similar species on this planet, I think the separation would be that our species are knowledge seekers. Our species wants to understand. Our species wants to make things happen. More than 10,000 years ago, people who I would call scientists learned how to hybridize wheat and chickpeas. And they did it in ways in which those crops today are still meaningfully important to our own existence and survival. And so I'm of the belief that human beings are naturally scientific, naturally inquisitive, and that all humans have the capability of understanding science, of doing some science, and then of understanding what the formal lifetime scientific workers are doing. So I'm of the view that we're all scientists, or at least that we should be. I'm of the view that we have the capacity to bring people up to a very high level of scientific understanding, and of the view that one of the mistakes that we've made among scientific elites is that our language and our discourse and our logic has accelerated in ways in which we've become disconnected from the rest of the species. Now, I'm sure that that's occurred through time, but never at the rate that it's occurring now. So I certainly know, as a child, I asked many, many, many scientific questions about how and why and what, and then found some answers on my own, found some answers by listening to other people, found some answers by listening to faculty members and teachers and so forth, certainly. But I'm just of the view that we're all scientists, and that's not going to go away, that's not going to change, and we need to find better and enhanced ways to bring everyone up and to enhance the communication between scientists who perform science for a living and the other scientists who happen to be the rest of the species, and we've done a poor job at that.
Okay, right on. Okay, Peggy.
Well, you've left me with the unfortunate task of having to follow these distinguished and eloquent colleagues, but I was actually going to make a comment rather like Mr. President here. I mean, at the end of the day, I think we are all scientists. Science, to me, is about discovery. It's about asking questions about how things work and why. It's about reducing uncertainty about the world around you. And, you know, starting with toddlers who learn how to walk or learn how to, you know, get a fork of food into their mouth and not on the floor. You know, there's a certain science to that. Certainly, as we get older, you know, learning to use an app on a phone, learning to perfect your tennis swing, you know, there are elements of science in all of that. And there is a formalized approach to science and learning about science and a spectrum of science, including, importantly, social science, where certain formalities of science are trained and the practice of doing scientific endeavors is honed. But I think that, you know, the truth is science underlies everything we do and who we are as a species, not completely unique to human beings, perhaps, in terms of learning certain kinds of things. But, you know, I think one of the challenges for all of us in the room is to help people understand that science isn't some special thing that only certain people can do. Science is something that's embedded in our daily lives, and it's embedded in everything that we hope for the future, and to start to bring the excitement of science and the practice of science, you know, to the youngest child and the older adults.
Yep, wonderful. So I think yeah, Keith, you want to make one more rebuttal here?
Well, I feel like I need to defend myself a little bit.
Okay.
Here. So, you know, Kaye knows that I regard social scientists as scientists, absolutely. There's just no doubt about that. So I'm not saying that scientists are people that are playing with test tubes and running around in white coats.
I should tell you, Keith, my husband doesn't think I'm a scientist. I don't have a lot.
And had Michael been able to hear my talk, he would have remembered that I said all humans are innate scientists. They're curious about the world, about themselves, right? They drive their parents crazy by asking how and why, right? And that's a fantastic thing. But I don't think in the context of a question, it's very useful to say, oh, everyone on the planet is a scientist. So,
okay, here's my counter to that.
Great.
We're good at doing stuff in the laboratory. We're good at making discoveries. The things we've failed at are getting the public to understand what we do, getting our work inculcated into policy, doing better in the classroom at teaching young people what science actually is rather than just textbooks full of facts. Those are the things we failed at. The people who are doing all of that, you're saying they're members of the scientific community, but I'm saying they're just as important as the people who are working in the laboratory.
Totally agree.
So let's call everybody a scientist. Why not?
Okay. I don't know how useful that is, but as a construct, but okay.
All right. Well, we're not going to work that out right now. But I do think maybe, given all the challenges we have, it's something worth continuing to wrestle with. Okay, here's another easy topic.
Holden, I just want to make a statement. So I've been of the view that nurses should be called nurse scientists because the nurse is observing you in the context of whatever condition that you have and whatever medical care situation that you have, and is making calculations based on theory and models and assumptions. And so what we've done is we've just created a situation where scientists should be more demonstrably observable in all the things that scientists do in our life, including giving direct, on-the-ground health care.
Amen. All right. Let's hear for nurses. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so here's, Willie? I have some other questions, but I don't have to answer them.
If we look back in history, some of the people that we think of the most renowned scientists in our history were not always trained formally as scientists or chemists, whatever. They were people who did what all of you said, observed the world around them, became curious about it, and tried to do things to improve their knowledge of the phenomena around them so that it would better our society, better humankind, and so forth. So I think if we look at it that way, I think it's here lately that we've begun to silo ourselves, sometimes maybe to our detriment.
You saying we might have put up a wall?
No.
We're really not going to let you get to your other questions.
I think we tunnel our way through that wall.
Yeah, okay. Peggy?
I mean, I think, you know, it was a little glib to say everybody's a scientist. And I think, you know, but my point there was that there really is science embedded in so much of what we do and how we live. And people don't always recognize that. And we live in a world where science, you know, for various reasons, has often seemed remote to people that haven't had the opportunity to have good science in their schools and education or scientific role models in their lives. And, you know, I think what we really need to do going forward is to help the public, starting at a very young age, really better understand science and not see it as something that they can't do. But I also think it is important, we need to educate the public and policymakers about the scientific method. And there really are some rigors to how you do science. It's not just that I can do anything and call it science. There's a process that has been, you know, really evolved over time to help us ask and answer critical questions and learn more about important issues in a systematic scientific way, and then hopefully bring that scientific evidence to bear.
So when I first heard the question, that is exactly where my mind went, was to the scientific method. And it is that inquisitiveness that, you know, Michael, you talked about, but it's also the different elements of the scientific method where people within the community can get involved in different parts of it. It doesn't mean that you know the entirety of it. And so the data collection part, the parts where you're trying to observe and then tweak what the theory is that you're trying to understand better or develop better. Those are the parts where there's this integration as well. And I think, Peggy, what you said really resonates with me. I don't think I would have thought, you know, growing up that I would be sitting on a stage in the American Association for the Advancement of Science, where science is in its title, coming from Barbados originally, growing up in East New York, Brooklyn. One could say, yeah, I didn't see a scientist, right? But there's the science, the act of doing science, the act of discovery and inquisitiveness. That's the part that I really want to get to, rather than labeling somebody a scientist. I think a lot of what we're trying to get to is the action part, not just the labeling part, the credentialing part.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that this notion of regarding humans as innate scientists is important. And as I discussed in my talk and in my editorial, having scientists go out into the rest of the world and be engaged in influencing and decision-making that advances the work of science is important. And I would regard those people as essential members of the scientific community. I just question whether it's really a useful construct to say a Major League Baseball player and a ballet dancer and a poet, taxi driver, are scientists. I'm not sure how useful that is as a construct for thinking about things.
Okay, anybody else want to weigh in on this question? I don't have to answer anymore if you don't want me to. All right, so here's my next topic, another light idea, which has to do with research integrity. So we've been having trouble with papers that have inappropriate images that were altered for a long time. we've been dealing with scientific fraud for years, but it's much more in the public consciousness in the last year or so, which began really mostly when everything happened at Stanford that ended up, that caused Mark Tessier-Levine to resign. But now, every week, this week we had two. Every week we have a big story in a national newspaper about another set of problems in science. And it's great for our news division because it gives them a lot of things to write about. But it's really not good for the image of science at all. And in the meantime, we also have all kinds of problems within our scientific enterprise. We have poor ways of treating people from every marginalized group you can find. We have graduate students who aren't getting the mentorship and career advice that they deserve. We have all kinds of ego and ambition and greed. And all these things are great for me because these are all the things I write about. But again, they're also not necessarily good for the way the public thinks about science. So I guess my question is, if one of the goals of the AAAS is to build trust in science, do we deserve that trust? And I'll go back this way. So Peggy, that puts you
So
on
I
the
get
hot
to go
seat.
first. Well, I guess, first of all, I think in terms of the issues around fraud and misconduct in science, it's a very big pot. And not everything is just like the other in that pot. I mean, I think we were just talking about the scientific method. The public needs to, first of all, understand more about the scientific method, as I said before, that it is iterative. You are actually trying to put out a hypothesis and disprove it. So when something is reported out and then new information comes along and people view that finding differently, that isn't fraud. That's the scientific process, which is iterative and you learn more, et cetera. And I think there has been a lot of confusion about that. But more importantly, what you're talking about is the actual fraudulent activity, the knowing misrepresentation of data, et cetera. And there are bad actors, and that's a problem. There also is, as I think you were touching on, a culture of science that actually creates pressures that make it hard to fail. Journals don't like to publish negative results. They like positive results. Tenure committees like publications, and they like positive results. And your lab director, when you're a graduate student, wants you to be productive and wants you to advance science in his or her lab. So I think we do have to look at the culture of science and the pressures on science, and we have to think about how to reward failure as well as success, and we have to create more transparency about how science is done and the data that underlies decision-making in terms of science. You also asked, should the public trust science? I think yes and no. I mean, I think we have to do more. We have to work every day to explain the science and how it's done and why. And I think we have to educate the public and be more transparent about the scientific process. And we have to find it unacceptable to have scientific fraud become embedded in scientific practice.
Okay, great. Yeah, Michael?
Yeah, so the trust index is actually unbelievably high. You know, you walk up, you get a thing of water, you put it in your mouth, you drink it, and you know that scientists through time have made it safe for you to do that. The food, the drugs, the machines that you ride in, the planes that you flew in here, everyone understands that those things are a result of scientific processes. And the fact that there are cheaters along the way, cheaters are going to cheat. They're cheaters. There have always been human cheaters. There's always been human liars. They're always going to cheat. They're always going to lie. They're motivated by all kinds of different things. Human nature cannot be taken out of that. But the scientific process is so demanding and so focused and so large in its scale that the results of that process, as manifested in what we understand about how nature works, what we understand about our bodies, what we understand about the medicines that we take, the food that we eat, the water that we're dependent upon, the systems that we're reliant on, all those things are scientific derivatives. So the trust index is very high. Cheaters are going to cheat, and we need to, be quicker about the process of kicking the cheaters out of the system so that they can't cheat anymore, and then correcting whatever the error was and moving forward. And that's what people expect, and people know that there's cheaters. There's no surprise about there being cheaters. And so the fact that it turns into a big deal, everybody's shocked because some professor cheated. Okay, yeah, one professor did, 20,000 professors didn't. The whole story's on the one professor that did. And so I just think that we should just be quick about it, admit the problems, and move on.
Yeah, we're having a hard time doing all that, but I agree with you, of course. All right, Kaye.
Well, when I thought of this question, the first thing that came to mind is that trust is earned. That's how trust works. And trust is earned when the different parties are able to engage and understand what's happening better. So I actually agree with what Michael just said about, I've done a project on food safety. That is not my area of expertise, but I wanted to understand the public value of science. And my choice there was, well, food safety. As you said, we go in the back. Folks that are in the back of the room, they're eating. You're not even thinking. You know that it's safe, right? That's the expectation. So there is that trust behind the science of food safety that we take for granted. And so we see all of these positives that exist. So I agree with what Michael just said. But I feel that another element that I would want to put in there is that to enhance that understanding and therefore trust, the communication of what scientists do, and we just had that long discussion about who's a scientist, and the general public, right, that is using the products that are derived from science. The way to get that done better, I think, is to have more of this engagement of the public in science. And possibly, and maybe Holden, this is your beat, to do a better job in terms of communicating science. And communicating science in ways that we get it, we understand it, and that it speaks to the questions that we actually have about a variety of things that we care about. And I can go into some details and specifics, but I think everyone here has something that they really care about. I live in Georgia now, and coastal Georgia is an area. I knew nothing about coastal Georgia and how conservation has been improving that 100 miles for a very long time until I got in a boat with a number of other folks that really understood what was going on there, and it was explained to me. And I fundamentally understood what was happening, the science behind it, the ethics behind it, the engagement of the public in it. I feel that immersive communication is also very important. So my first point is science is that trust is earned, and it has to be authentic. But I think that also that involvement in the processes that we care about, that each of you cares about, that enables us to understand better and to trust better and trust more.
Right. Willie?
Research integrity and public trust of the research that we do and the research results. Just read something that I jotted down before coming up here. Despite its imperfections, science has a demonstrable track record for generating knowledge, driving innovation, and improving our quality of life, and that for our society as a whole. The positive impact of science on our society underscores its importance and justifies public trust and its potential to address the pressing challenges of our lives and improve all of our lives. So While it's crucial to acknowledge and address limitations and challenges facing the academic practice of science, it's equally important to recognize its enduring value and potential for positive impact. And if we just think, we tolerate the concept now in our society of alternative facts. That's an oxymoron as far as I'm concerned. But there are people who subscribe to that. And I think anytime we hear of issues of plagiarism that drives and other scientific misconduct, that just lends credence to the fact that there might be this oxymoronic concepts like that there are alternative facts rather than that they're absolute truths. And most of us don't know what they are, but as human beings, as these general scientists that we were all talking about earlier, it's our God-given right and duty to try to seek those facts. And that's what science is all about, in my judgment.
Amen. All right, Dr. Y,
I'm getting in trouble again.
are you going to be an outlier again?
No, I don't think so. Maybe.
Okay.
So first of all, I guess I would start by trying to answer your question simply to say that I believe that trust in science, trust in scientists is deserved. That's what you asked.
Yes.
And so then you ask, well, with all this misbehavior going on, there's no doubt that has led to an erosion of trust in the process. And there are arguments that we've all heard that I disagree with, I'll start by saying that says, don't worry about it, science is self-correcting. So, if people behave badly, it'll get uncovered and it'll be figured out. Or, don't worry about it, Holden Thorp is going to put together pieces of software that figure it out. And so the true stuff will be maintained and the false stuff will be figured out. So therefore it's fine. And I disagree with both of those.
Yeah.
Right. So why do I say that the trust is deserved? And I guess I would say, very similar to what Willie said, and that is that over time, the process by which scientists work to uncover truth, right, has moved knowledge forward in ways that arguably benefit all people. There's questions about that, but benefit all people. And that process over time has merited trust in that characterization over time has merited trust in the process. And that, as Michael said, the people doing science are humans, and humans are flawed, and there will be some cheaters, just like in science, just like every other human endeavor. So then you could say, well, don't worry about it then, it's just a small fraction of people, and that's just the way things are. I would say, no, that's not quite true, and that the social forces that we've built into the scientific process, into the process of being scientists, right, actually encourage this kind of misbehavior, as Michael also said, and that the kind of careerism that drives our lives as scientists, where there's been these false metrics that have been defined as what success is, only positive results, as Peggy said, and publishing in certain journals, being first or last author, publishing at a high rate, and so you have to keep the results coming out, and the results have to be told as full stories. All of those things can easily drive misbehavior because people want to keep their careers. It's fair enough. And so I think if we take a hard look at the standards by which we define success, right, and realize that negative results can tell really important stories, that non-full stories can actually, in the hands of other people who think about the problems from different directions, really move things forward in a much more brisk way. You know, if we just take a hard look at how we're setting these standards, then I think that the amount of misbehavior could actually go down.
Okay.
But in the meantime, the process, I think, is trustworthy.
All right, you got some fans out there on that. All right. So, terrific. I didn't expect any of you to say that science didn't deserve trust, but like you all said, we still have a lot to do if we want to earn it. Okay, so now let's switch to the institutions. There are 5 university administrators up here. Scary. Peggy, you get the prize for not being one.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah.
not me.
We have,
Although I did grow up on a university campus.
Yes.
That counts.
Yes, you did.
we have a president, a dean, a vice president, vice chancellor, and most recently a provost. So, so let's talk about the role of the institutions in a lot of these questions, in who gets to participate in science, in research integrity. I mean, if you ask me, the biggest problem with research integrity is that every time we try to work with institutions to make corrections, they bury us in lawyers and bureaucracy and paperwork. And that's what drags the whole process out. But I've been on their side, so I know what they're going through. But that is something we really need to work out. But there are a lot of other readouts of things that aren't going as well as they should inside the institutions. And to me, the strongest one is the graduate students who are, in my opinion, justifiably asking for improvements in their compensation and other things that they deserve for doing most of the hard work of scientific research. I expected a few fans on that, that comment.
True.
But, you know, some of the most heartbreaking meetings I ever had when I was a provost was when a graduate student would come to me and say, I told my advisor that I want to go work in industry or science policy, and they've suddenly just lost interest in me because they're only interested in graduate students that want to perform an academic career. And I wish I could say that that was a rare occurrence, but it wasn't. And so to me, these graduate student strikes that we're seeing are that we've really not done a good job of being the thing that we're supposed to be to start with, and that's a school. So we'll start with President Crow, and then we'll let Peggy clean the whole thing up after all the administrators have had their
so we're seriously messed up on a lot of fronts. You know, we have working models of institutions that are 1,000 years old. We have these American universities that are almost 400 years old. We have faculty cultures which exist in certain kinds of ways. So I don't know, frankly, for instance, I'll just pick on the PhD programs, why a PhD program isn't 3 or 4 years. You finish your degree, and then you determine, are you interested in academic research? Then you go, like a physician, to a specialization. You're interested in industrial research, you do this. You're interested in public administration, you take this track. You're interested in science journalism, you have this track. So what we have now is we have a system in which people are selected as recent college graduates to become I have derogatory terms that I could use, but they become the assistant of some professor, in which then they're weeded and weeded and weeded and weeded and weeded. And so we need fundamental change. It's very difficult to bring about this type of fundamental change, and I've been a part of a number of changes at the institutions that I've been a part of, including 22 years as president at Arizona State. But what we need is a fundamental recognition by the academy itself that the system is archaic. And then we need to have pathways to degrees that are faster and quicker and less expensive. And then if you want to be an academic scientist, you go and work like a physician that then wants to be a dermatologist after you've gotten your MD degree, and then you're on a certain track, and then that needs to be highly compensated at that point. Because now you're a contributing member of the group in the same way that a physician is when they take their internship or their residency. We need a different structure. So we have a flawed structure. It's not working very well, and we need to change it.
Okay. All right, that's the president's view. Dean?
So this is clearly one of the major topics that comes across annually at my institution. and comes right to my door. The students themselves tell us what the issues are, and they're part of the solution as well. I want that to be understood. It isn't that it just comes in and we need to just fix it. It is that the students really do understand how to put what the issues are on the table that we need to deal with. And I want to preface what my answer will be with this. The most important output from my perspective at a university is the talent. It isn't necessarily the patent or the discovery. All of those are great things. But why are we in a university? Producing talent, encouraging talent, developing talent. And that is something that if we take our eyes off that, then we get down into the positions that you're describing where things are not terrific, right? We have to keep that as the goal. The second point I would make is that as we're trying to do better in terms of salaries for graduate students, positioning of students to the next job, and it doesn't have to be an academic job. Don't hate me for saying that, but it is really, truly, you have to figure out what the talented student wants to do over time. My daughter is in the graduate program right now. I'm an academic. My father was an academic. I have a cousin that was an academic. All of us economists, we all have PhDs. And she says she wants a PhD, but she wants to go in the private sector. And we have that conversation over the dinner table. But at the end of the day, it's about developing her intellect, her brain, her discovery, her talent, her empathy as well in terms of how she dissects and understands how to work on problems. And at some point, she'll decide what the next step is. And I think it's our job in the academic sphere, in my college, with my advisors and all of my team, to ensure that every single one of those students gets to be the most out of that opportunity when they're in our midst. And that we listen to them, have them be part of the solution process, and move the needle forward in the positive direction for these students. But we can't take our eyes off the fact that the most important product or output is the talent that we're developing at our universities and colleges.
Right on. All right. Vice President for Research, Willie May.
Our educational system, K through gray, as Keith likes to say, is certainly not perfect. But it works to some extent because of you in the audience. So it works and it produces the talent that have sustained us up to this point. But as President Crow says, it certainly ain't perfect. It needs to be rethought. And I think we need to think about, are there better ways that we can train the next generation to do the jobs that we wanted them to do? Because our jobs are becoming far more specialized, our society is changing, and maybe the way that we produce the talent for those new jobs needs to be rethought. I certainly don't know the answer, but I think it's high time that we begin to think about that.
All right. Vice Chancellor Yamamoto.
So I think that, so you began with the question about why are graduate students underpaid? And I think so I certainly agree they are. And I think that is one element of a set of, just to put it kindly, conflicts of interest that the funding agencies and the academia has in the ways that they think about compensating graduate students. So the federal government made a decision many years ago that graduate students, postdocs, training in science would receive a stipend that would cover their, and the reason that they did that and didn't give stipends to poets and dancers was that they said, oh, well, they've got to be doing experiments and they need to be in the lab all the time. So we don't want to have to saddle them without having to go out and work at Starbucks in order to be able to pay their rent. And so we'll give them a stipend. So So that stipend, you may or may not know, was agreed upon in the Kirstein NRSAs as 75% of living expenses. So we're not quite there, as you might, all the graduate students out there know. And so we haven't hit that mark for a long time. Living expenses are very different in different parts of the country. No attention to that, right? And you all know, we all know that the NIH just made an adjustment in stipend for postdocs. And when I've been in Bethesda asking about when this is going to be done for graduate students, the answer is, oh, no, we're not going to do that. Why not? Well, because that would bust the budget for research. Those dollars are needed to be able to buy the supplies and equipment needed to do experiments. And so we can't be just using it to pay graduate students because there won't be anything for them to do experiments with. So I think that's at best a failure of prioritization about the ways that we're thinking about compensating our endeavor. And I could tell you stories about things that the NIH could do differently that could save enormous amounts of money, but I'll just mention just one. And that is that the NIH allows faculty salaries to be compensated almost completely with NIH funds in the high 90%. So why not students? Well, because students don't have any power. So let's not worry about it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's just a failure of prioritization, and there are things that need to be done, like getting a bigger NIH budget and making decisions about compensating trainees because of what they're doing, that really need to change. Well, this then, to me, that is just one side of one element of the conflicts of interest that we have, right? Faculty aren't interested in graduate students moving through the program very quickly, as Michael was talking about, because they need them in the lab to be doing experiments. Same thing with postdocs. So the graduate training periods have gotten longer and longer and longer because faculty it's not in the faculty's best interest for people to finish quickly. So we need to be thinking about how we're setting these standards and priorities in ways where we're asking, are we really acting as a university that is turning out the intellectual products, right, that can then go out into society, do what they want to do in ways that actually serve society. I think that just going back and looking at the ways that we're thinking about these processes, identifying these conflicts of interest and thinking about ways to address them is things that we need to really be getting busy with.
Okay, Peggy.
Well, I'll let the applause finish.
Yeah, good.
I haven't been a university administrator, but I did begin my career thinking I would go into academic medicine, and then made the decision to go into health policy, in part because of watching the HIV/AIDS epidemic emerge and really wanting to work at the intersection of more than just academic medicine, but the intersection with other issues. And my chair of medicine at the time said, if you're not back after I finished my medical residency training in 2 years to do subspecialty training, you will have thrown away your entire medical career and you will regret it forever. Well, I ended up not being a huge embarrassment to my educational institution, and about 10 years later, he called me and said, I'm really interested in health policy. Can you help me figure out how I can transition to work in that area? Yeah. So I feel like the world is kind of changing, number one, in terms of a appreciation that academic medicine isn't the only place where the action is. And I feel like academic settings are changing. And, I'm watching from the outside, but I did grow up on a university campus, and there wasn't the kind of interaction with industry that there is now in terms of labs that are, working on projects with companies. There's a more integrated ecosystem now in that regard, I think in biomedical research at least. Government is obviously hugely important, even if they're not in the university, and Keith pointed out some things that could do better. But I think, this is towards science without walls, well, I think we have to recognize that academia is more permeable than maybe it used to be, and we need to think about how that can benefit students, enhance resources, improve opportunities for people to do important, rigorous scientific work in many different settings, and to, importantly, apply the fruits of science and research to a broader set of issues, for the good of the public and the people.
Terrific. Okay, so we're coming to the lightning round. And here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask Peggy, Michael, and Kaye, starting with Kaye, we'll go that way, to each give us the thing that they think is on their mind, but maybe the thing that they think that was most important to help us achieve the goal of science without walls. And then after that, Keith will get to give his last remarks as AAAS president. And then Willie will give his first remarks as AAAS president. All right, so Kaye, go ahead.
All right. So there are a couple of things I want to say, so I'm going to talk fast maybe. The first is making visible the invisible. I'm on a committee at the National Science Foundation, the Committee on Equal Opportunities in Science and Engineering. And we have 3 reports, 2 are out, we're working on the 3rd one. It's about making visible the scientists and engineers that are typically not seen, the small n, the folks that are in the room and they're not seen, or not in the room or not at the table, so that diversity and inclusion part is important. The second thing I want to say, and I want to just read this statement by Yo-Yo Ma. From the Golden Rule to the iconic Ode to Joy, from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, a symbol of freedom and unity around the world, to E equals MC squared. The radical formula that changed how we understand the universe, these words, sounds, and codes help us speak a common language and agree on shared values. They give us a foundation for trust. It's not enough to outsource culture to the artists and the musicians and receive it in a passive audience. We must engage the full spectrum of human understanding, and every one of us needs to participate in strengthening our cultural resources all the time to generate trust and understanding by pursuing basic scientific research, playing music together, or simply looking at the stars. We need to put culture first because it is the only way to make sure that the decisions we make as a global society are actually good for humanity. So I just wanted to make that statement.
Okay. Well, as a scientist, a musician, and someone who used to run a planetarium, I think that's a really good quote. Yeah. All right, Michael.
Yeah, what I would say is that our biggest dilemma is that as the speed of science accelerates, so we're measuring gravitational wave functions now, we know where photons have emerged in terms of the local star, we know how they're getting to us. We each had multiple injections of messenger ribonucleic acid put into our bodies to fend off a messenger ribonucleic acid virus, which in itself, the vaccine was designed by a supercomputer and then ultimately manufactured in complex new processes. The acceleration of all these things is now moving at this speed, while the rest of our species is moving at this speed. And as the gap grows, if we do not find a way to raise the general way in which we understand these things at a species level, and if we don't find ways to communicate, the tar and feathers that you can already sense in our society will become very significant going forward. Because if you don't understand why things are being decided, if you don't understand why we're moving in this direction, if you don't understand how a magnetic field will contain a fusion reaction system that we can now conceptualize as working, you're going to do what happened in Carl Sagan's Contact and blow the damn thing up like they did on one of the missions, if you'll remember. And so we can't have that happen. But more important than that, to the Yo-Yo Ma quote, if we don't find a way to bring everyone to some level, why aren't more people double and triple majoring in college with one of their majors in science? Because we make it hard to do. Why aren't there more people with higher levels of understanding of these things? Because we make it hard to do. Why is math so hard for people to learn? Because we make it hard to do. So we've solved so many things, and I think that we can solve this, but it's a dilemma of dilemmas that we need to work out because everything is accelerating so rapidly, and we've got to figure out how to do this.
Okay, good one. All right, Peggy.
All right. Well, first I should say I actually took a science course with Yo-Yo Ma in college. I'm not sure that either of us were the stars of the class, though. But, I guess, building on what has already been said, I mean, this is a time when we desperately need, the best possible science and technology to address the huge challenges before us. Every one of the really big challenges before us, from climate change and environmental degradation to food and water, safety and security, to economic stability, to public health and preventing pandemics, to the education of our children. All these things require us to get rid of the walls, to work across boundaries, to work across disciplines, across sectors, across borders. We really have to figure out how to work together to solve these problems. And I think there's a growing appreciation that is the case. Although, frankly, I would have thought a global pandemic like COVID would have brought us all together to achieve a critical goal. I was wrong about that. Hopefully, we can learn and we can do better. And I think that's part of what we have to keep communicating and engaging our scientific brethren and our community and our policymakers to try to achieve so that we can really harness science for the betterment of humanity, as was said.
Perfect. Okay, so Dr. Yamamoto, Mr. President, for a few more minutes. Congratulations on an absolutely fantastic AAAS meeting. Cheer for Keith, everybody. All right, you get the last word of the meeting. And thanks for such a great meeting. Tell us how to get rid of these walls.
I'm going to tell you how to get over the walls. I'll just, I think, really use Peggy's comment as a takeoff point. Everyone in this room knows that our society, and really here I mean global society, is facing a set of existential challenges. And they're existential because their solutions are not going to be achieved with our current science and technology, that we need major advances in order to take on these issues of energy and health and food and the environment at the pace that's going to be needed to allow us to continue to exist. That's pretty serious. So what does that mean? I think it means that we need to be able to go faster and more efficiently in the ways that we work. And that my view on this is that what's holding us back are these walls that we discussed over the last few days. And that my hope coming out of this meeting, I mean, this is a meeting that pulls together the real power of science and technology. It's the people who do the experiments, the people who think about how those experiments can really move forward into changes that are directly helpful for the public good in ways that we talk about as drivers of business or law or education, communication, and so forth. So to have all those people collected together in this meeting and thinking about the challenges of getting over or through or taking down the walls, I think is what my hope is of the product of this meeting. And that some of you will not only be able to realize that those walls are there and go back and talk about them and puzzle over it with your friends or family, colleagues, about how to break them down, but will in fact begin to do something directly, as I said, as individuals or parts of groups, or inserting yourself into some of these marvelous programs that the AAAS has that can really have an impact on these things. So that's the hope, and I think that simply recognizing the walls is a critical first step. I mean, the walls are there, and as potent as they are, because we've just stopped thinking about them and allowed them to become transparent, just a part of the scenario we all have to live in forever. And I think that's what we need to recognize, that needs to change, and we can change that. So that's my hope for the meeting.
All right. That's a great way to end. Okay, well, Keith, thank you for an extraordinary tenure as the AAAS president. And now the new president of the AAAS, Willie May, will tell us what he has planned for the 2025 annual meeting, February 13th to 15th in Boston. Willie, what are we going to do in Beantown?
8 hours or so.
There you go.
We've been talking about how we realize science without walls. The theme for the 2025 meeting, which will be in Boston, as you've heard, is, give me a drum roll. There we go. Science shaping tomorrow. Science shaping tomorrow. We think this is especially appropriate for a city like Boston, home of some of the top academic institutions on the planet, and one where science and innovation have been shaping our future since the earliest days of our republic. As we all know, science-informed policies and decision-making are critical to ensuring a healthy, prosperous, and equitable future for us all. Relationships of trust between scientists and policymakers are foundational to science-informed decision-making, which will lead to a better society. Not only a better country, but a better society for mankind. We must work toward establishing an ecosystem where the expertise of scientists and engineers is put to work collaboratively with policymakers and communicators to better identify and address both future challenges and future opportunities that we can exploit. Whether we are talking about climate change, public health, you name the others, or the responsible and ethical use of AI, science alone cannot solve the most pressing problems that we face as a society. We've discussed this even during our time here in Denver. It's only when scientists and policymakers trust and collaborate with each other at the local, the national, and global levels that we can address the greatest challenges of our time and overcome them. So our 2025 annual meeting invites us to celebrate and strengthen the projects and the collaborations among science, policy, and communications and communicators that already exist, and to promote the infusion of science and technical expertise into the public discourse and to policy making. I personally am looking forward to discussing and celebrating the bright future that awaits us if we can successfully tackle these great challenges together. That's it.
All right. Okay, well, let's thank our fantastic panel. Willie, that sounds like an outstanding foundation for next year's meeting. And just to tell everyone, the site to submit proposals for the meeting is open now through May 6th, and all the information you need is available at AAAS.org/meetings. So with that, we bring the 2024 annual meeting to a close. Please stay and enjoy the food and drink as you are already doing. Many thanks for being here and safe drive home.